As you know, I always start with a little show and tell, and in this day and age of a lot of acronyms and stuff, we have POTUS and DACA and all those other acronyms. Who knows what LSMFT is?
Lucky Strike means fine tobacco.
You got it.
He can even sing it. Wow.
Lucky Strike means fine tobacco. This is a tobacco tin, and this predates that, and I'm thinking it's right about World War II or before, and it says on it, it's toasted.
Well, and Lucky Strike used to say our green went to war because they gave up the green packaging for white packaging so they could paint the tanks green.
And this was a especially lucky strike because Carol found it upstairs in her mom's attic, and inside there are negatives for pictures of her family. So that's the show.
Cleaning pays off.
Don't throw anything away.
For anybody that doesn't know, this is Susan Rombeek, one of our island neighbors, and everybody knows her. So she's going to talk a little bit about her childhood memories and home.
Yeah, I will. I can tell you one thing, don't go for coffee at his place. He lures you into all kinds of things. That's why I'm here now, and to my surprise, I didn't think there would be that many people. Okay, I'll start with the start of the World War II in the Netherlands. On May 10th, 1940, I lived in The Hague. And The Hague is a very important city in Holland. You know, Rotterdam, Amsterdam, The Hague. And we have the Peace Palace and all that kind of stuff. Anyhow, I woke up and I heard a tremendous amount of Junker airplanes flying about at level of the roofs almost, and they were on their way to bomb Rotterdam, and they did. And then they told us if we don't surrender, they would take the next city, which was Utrecht, and they would bomb that. So we capitulated because that was too much. They bombed the whole middle of Rotterdam out of it, and there was nothing left. And so I had never seen that many planes in my life, and I just thought, oh my God, what's going on, you know? And so you run out of your house, and then my father had a motorcycle, a DKW 90. Not very impressive, but anyhow, he says, I'm gonna look what's going on. So he went on one of the main streets of The Hague, the Laan van Meerdervoort, it's still there, and it's still Main, and, and he went there and he said, oh, I see all the parachutists, all German parachutists, and they had landed right outside The Hague. And we're marching in. And then in his imagination, he had never seen a tank. So he told everybody to take out their furniture and barricade the streets so those Germans couldn't get anywhere. And then he saw his first tank and they went right over. And he got blamed that everybody had ruined the furniture. So anyhow, that was my first introduction to war.
How old were you then?
I was 7 years old, and so that was very impressive. Then, okay, I have to stay online. The first thing we had to do was to black out all the windows. And when you later on see my pictures here of my house, we had a huge house and we had one window that was from the second story all the way down. And I don't know how my parents ever managed to get that because there was no way that you could put a ladder up there. But they managed, and so we all had duty at night. Everybody had to black out all the windows because that was required. Supposedly nobody could see that there was the Hague, you know, so we did all that. And then after a while, okay, let me see. They had, and you will find them here, what they did, we lived on the corner of 2 streets. And we lived in the fruit neighborhood. I was on the corner of the Melon Street, Cantaloupe Street, and the Boysenberry Street. Think about that. And so they said, okay, the people that live on the corners, we are going to give you orders. And you are going to tell everybody what to do. So here are some of those orders that they would give to us, and we had to go out and tell everybody.
Were these, I'm sorry, German orders or Dutch orders?
German, well, they tried to speak in Dutch, but they didn't do a very good job. So here is the translation in English under it. And then I have, we all had to get an ID card. And I got one from my grandfather because I didn't get one, I was too young. And so, and then we got, of course, all ration cards, and you know about that too. And then the hunger came. And what happened, I don't know if you know the story of one bridge too far. The Allies had gone all the way through Belgium. They had the Battle of the Bulge there, and they were going up to Holland, and they liberated the southern part of Holland. And we saw that all the trains were bringing in all the German soldiers to fight at the Rhine. That's where it was by Arnhem and the Rhine. And they couldn't cross that bridge because all those German soldiers were coming in. So we said, okay, we are not gonna do this for you. So they had a big, how do you call it, a strike? And when they say, okay, we are not gonna drive any more trains. And so they stopped that. And then the Germans said, okay, you're not transporting our soldiers anymore. So we'll take over all the trains, and we'll take our own soldiers over there to fight. And so they said, we are not going to give you any food anymore. So Amsterdam, Rotterdam, The Hague, that whole section did not get any food because we were cities and all the farms are in the other parts of the country. So there was no food anymore. So we were very, very hungry. And we also did not have any heat. And I know that they were building the Atlantic Wall, as they called it, so they kicked out a lot of people out of their houses because they wanted to build that wall. And I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it still has big bunkers. They haven't been able to even destroy those. And they were building a barrier for England, because that was where they were going to. And they thought from Holland you could easily hit England. And then they invented the V1 and the V2. And that airport where they had landed with the parachutist, that was used for V1 and V2. And they thought that they could still invent a V3 and then they would win the war. They thought there must have been nuclear or something like that. And so they would take the V1 and V2 and they would shoot them over our heads. So every time they shot them off, you would stand there and listen and think, okay, this one is not falling on our head. But very unusual, they were going to London And one of our Guemians here got the hit on her house and her mother was killed. And that's very unusual that we both end up on the same little island, you know. And so I don't know if she wants to talk about that, but that was to me very, very telling. And then, because we didn't get any food anymore, so what do you do? And we didn't have any heat either. And that particular night, or that winter, was extremely cold. So we couldn't heat our houses. And if you can see, my house is huge. I have a huge house. We are on the corner. See?
Wow.
And so the ice, I slept in this room, and the ice was standing on the walls. And so my mother had all these inventions. We tried to heat up some warm water and put, I think it was a gin bottle in it. And then you heated up your bed beforehand, and then she had a whole, she made bags from blankets that you crawled into so the sheets wouldn't be too cold and all that. But then, of course, you had a horrible experience because you had to go to the bathroom. And so you had to get out of your warm hole, and there is this very cold linoleum. By the time you go to the bathroom, you didn't have to go anymore. They had to go back in again. So, yeah, that was really not a very good thing. But anyhow, so we started to get in these horrible forages for wood to burn. And but we had, some people had streets with trees in front of them. And one night somebody took our tree. And that was really not what we had planned. So they snuck up and they took our tree. I remember that very, very well, because he said, it's gone. Somebody else was lucky. And then we had a stove that was like a big coffee can. And it had a hole on this side and a hole on this side. And they called it a mayo stove. And you had to make little pieces of wood about this big. And you would put that in there, and that's what you would cook on. And I think they even had a picture of something like it. It's not the mayo one, because when we were liberated, everybody hung that stove on the flags. Because they thought, okay, that was gone. Anyhow, so the next thing was, okay, I'm going. We had to find more wood. So we would go in the attic, and of course we had a huge house, and we would look at the support of our house and saw parts of them off, so we could. So it is from, what is gonna, when is the house gonna fall down or not, you know? So they would have these little pieces of wood, and my brother was always really good at that, and he would go up there. He was about 2 years older than I. And so then, of course, my mother got a baby, and that was disaster, because there was nothing to eat. And there was nothing, my mother always said, I borrowed everything except the baby. And he is still very happy, and he's a jazz musician and goes all over the world. So, but anyhow, so now we had to get food for him. So my brother and I, and there were still some people, see, my parents, just before the war, there was this depression. And my father had lost his job because he worked in a store that had gone bankrupt. So he didn't have any money to really buy up a lot of stuff before the war. So we still had people that peeled their potatoes. So my brother and I would go for weeks and collect peelings of potatoes. And then he would get it on his bicycle, and the bicycle had wooden tires, because it had you were either riding on the rim, because nobody had rubber, or you had wooden tires, and he would go all over in the to the farms and all that. I don't know where he all went, but he would come home with about this much milk, and we had worked for 2 weeks to collect all that, and he had this much milk. But that was for the baby. And we all lived in one room. Let me see here. In this room, because that was the sunniest, and it was between the two etages. What is that? I'm trying to get my Dutch out of my head, but I can't, because I've been reading this. So we all lived there, and then of course the light went out. So what we would do, we would take our bicycle and put it on the stand, and then we had some kind of a wire, and that went to the big light in the middle, and we had a little tiny light there, and a lid from some kind of a bucket or whatever, and then we would ride the bicycle, because the dynamo would make the light. So either somebody would sit on the floor and go like this, or you would be riding to nowhere, but that was duty, you know. If you wanted to read or do anything, that was it, because we didn't have enough candles. It was just crazy, couldn't do that. But as you will read, the hunger became very, very bad. And also my brother was still going into houses that were supposedly going to be the big Atlantic Wall. And he was there, and my girlfriend, her brother went there, and they were mined, and he lost his leg. And his father actually was also killed during the 5 days of war that we had. So he was killed before. So when that happened, I said, nobody's going there anymore. And so did my parents. They said, I don't care where you get the wood, but you're not going to go there anymore. We don't want any legs, whatever. So then we got this thing about the churches. And the churches were setting up some kind of a feeding station for us. And you had to be a certain weight in order to qualify for that. Now, I was not very lucky, because I seem to have real heavy bones. I don't know that. Now I'm okay with it. But I had 2 heavy bones. But my brother was taller. We are very tall. We are 6'8" and 10 and whatever. And so he qualified. And he was sent away. And they go over the sea, and it's an inland sea. It's called the Zuiderzee. I think they gave it a different name now. But we had to cross that to get in order to get to the farms there. And they did that at night. And they had like 5 barges with 1 tugboat. And I'm really thinking now about what we are experiencing here with the children, because my parents talked and talked to me about having to go and probably never see them again. We didn't know where we were going, and so I can see what the other parents are going through right now when you don't know where your kids are. And, you know, it is heart-wrenching. And I know that my mother told me, I will eat grass, I'll eat blades of grass, I won't go anywhere, you know, please let me stay. And then, what happened, the Allies accidentally bombed The Hague. And so a lot of these kids never saw their parents anymore. And I know that because my father was an EMT, and he went there, and he came home with a horrible story that I will never forget either. He said there were people there that were cutting off the fingers to get the rings. And, you know, people are so unbelievable. I mean, to me that seems unimaginable. To go there, not to help, but to get something, whatever. And so I remember that very well, that he came home and he said, I don't know what these people are doing, but they were just stealing the rings of the fingers. And you see that often now, you know, when there is a disaster, there are always people that go out and rob. But I know, so now I'm going on my float. And accidentally, there were two further removed cousins of me that were going on the same place. And my father said, you stay with them because they have a place. They know where they're going. And I didn't know where I was going. So I said, okay, I'm going to Noord-Laren, which was way in the Groningen, up in Friesland there by, in the north of Holland. And so every time we would stop at a school, oh no, first I have to tell you, the crossing of the sea was very hazardous because Allies as well as Germans were shooting, and my brother's tugboat was torpedoed. And so he floated somewhere where nobody could find him. Took us 2 months to find him after the war, because nobody knew where he was, you know. So, and he was not, and you didn't have mail. There was no mail. There was nothing, no communication or anything, which is hard to imagine now. But you know, there was no. It just wasn't there. So anyhow, so he was torpedoed. I was not, and I ended up in many. I think there were schools that they had a session going from who wants this and who wants that, and they said, I want 2 boys and I want 1 girl and I want this and I want that. But I had the instruction I was going to go and stick with those 2 nieces that I had married. So I stayed with the nieces, and so I finally ended up somewhere in the middle, and my father had also given me the instruction, if you don't know where to go, always find a reverend or a minister or something. They can find you a place. So I came in Noord-Laren where my nieces turned down to their place, you know. And I was, and it was a real rainy night, and it was a horse and buggy, and I was just sitting there, and I said, I'm going to the minister. Okay. So I went to the minister, and I knocked at the door, and I said, here I am. And he said, oh, we just had a children's transport here. So they had to talk for a while. And then I was assigned to the principal of the elementary school. Now the only thing that really surprised me is that nobody liked his daughter. She had problems, and I was trying to be nice, you know, and I got along with her, but nobody else liked her. And so I was kind of surprised about that, because I didn't think she was that horrible. I mean, she could be a friend to anybody. Then the Canadians came. And I can tell you, you can't say anything bad about Canada here. Never, ever. They solved the problem why she wasn't liked, because the principal was a traitor. And so he ended up in jail right away. And then they put us in a little room, and I complained, and I said, why are you doing this to me? My father is in the resistance, and my father was in the resistance. He was very active in the resistance. And we had to deliver resistance newspapers, my brother and I, because they thought that the Germans would not suspect kids to do that, you know. So, in a way, you know, you learn to lie and everybody say it's fine. You know, you tell somebody to go this way or that way, and you lie. But I know that when the first German troops came into The Hague, they must have been Austrians that were very hungry, because they had no idea all the stuff that we still had at that time in 40 in our stores. So they were really, really nice, and they would buy all the candy and they would give it to us. And immediately my father said, you don't take anything of that, and if you want them to find a place, you tell them the other way. And I said, but it's candy. We don't get candy that often. But no, you were not to talk. And when we were caught delivering a paper, he would say, you're just the dumbest person in the world. You know nothing. You just sit there, and we were very good at that. I still am. But so, I mean, there were all these rules, and I know that at one time my father was very upset because his friend had been caught and he was executed. And so we all were, of course, very sad about it, but you had to be very, very sly too. We had a farmer that at one time took us for about 2 weeks to be on his farm and get fed. Of course it didn't work out for me, because the women had to work in the house. So I had to clean, and my brother rode the horses. And I didn't get to go to the horses. And I just had to clean and clean and clean. And oh gosh, that's not my thing. But and he was very famous afterwards. He got quite a lot of rewards, because he saved over 40 landed pilots that would land, and British pilots, and he had the whole thing set up in his hayloft. There were rooms in his hayloft where they could be hidden until he could send them over. Yeah, he was but he was also very clever. He would come to us with a bag of potatoes or something, and he would land right beside the Germans. He would put his boat right beside the German boat. He said, they never think about that. He said, I'm fine, I can go, you know. And he would get all his stuff and deliver it all over The Hague. And he said, well, they think that we are not courageous and that we are not going to do that. But he was quite a guy. So, but not for me, because I had to clean. But then I ended up in Noord-Leyden, which is in the northeastern part of Holland. And the biggest thing that happened, that will forever stay with me, is that the Germans came in, and there was going to be a huge fight about a city that was the capital of the next province, Groningen. And there was going to be a big fight. And what they had done, they had made moats all around the different little places where there was a road. And then they were filtered water, so you couldn't get the tank through it. And then they had tremendous amounts of rocks that were put in some kind of a building on the side of the road. And so in the morning, all these Germans came, you know, all military, they were going to fight in Groningen. And they pulled all those barricades over. Well, the next moment, we had a military hospital in Zuid-Laren, South-Laren, North-Laren, South-Laren. And here I saw all these German young boys on crutches with bandages all over, and they had to climb over all the rocks that the other ones. Well, the Nazis says, when you're old, when you're crippled, we don't want you. That is one of their sayings, so they apparently just left their own soldiers climbing over it. It was a horrible sight. It was just awful. And then, of course, the farmers came and the Canadians came, and in 5 minutes they just cleaned the whole road and off they went. And then I found out that my my host was not of the right party, to say that, so they put him in jail. And then they took the house for the staff. Now this is kind of iffy, and I don't know if you all are prepared to hear this, but they taught me what menstruation was. Because I didn't, and my mother was trying to tell me, but she didn't have a chance. And so I thought, oh gosh, now that's fun. So yeah, they were very nice to me, but at first they weren't. At first they were really mean to me, and I said, hey, wait a moment. My father is in the resistance, I'm from the Hague, and apparently they checked that out, because we had, how do you translate that, Marvas? It are naval women that were their guides, Navy women, and she was Dutch. And I told her that, and I said, hey, why are you being so mean to me? And so she must have checked it out. Because then they were the loveliest people I could imagine. And I could climb on the tanks and do everything that I wanted to, you know. But then later on I was thinking, all those troops were stationed right by us in the elementary school. And those guys, half of them didn't make it, because the next day was this horrible, horrible battle. So, I don't know, that you don't think about it at that moment. You just have fun with them, and they of course had cigarettes, which was the big thing in that time. You know, you could do anything with a cigarette. Oh, so, but anyhow, now, I did the transport, my brother, and I just found that out, he helped to get some of the Allies through the woods there, and he was shot. And he showed me, and I said, I didn't know that. He was, his leg was all shot up, and he was also deaf because of all the bombing. So he didn't come out as well as I did. But he was very good at that. And okay, now, the other thing is, just recently, somebody, okay, my father-in-law was a Navy pilot, and he was shot down trying to defend one of the big bridges. And he was very much honored because he was able to kill a German while he was shot down, and he also was able to light his plane on fire, so they wouldn't be able to use it. But he ended up for 2 or 3 years in Poland in a POW camp. Then his wife, who was kicked out of her house because of the Atlantic Wall, she ended up in a little town where her mother lived and her family. Now, 2 of her brothers were of the wrong kind. But one of them apparently liked her a lot and helped her, because she got a house, and I don't know, oh, I didn't bring the picture. Okay, we have houses that are 2 under 1 roof, and she got 1/2 of this, which were 3 rooms. So she had 2 kids. She was alone, her husband was in Poland. And then the lady that had the other half had her brother come over, because you will see here, they were rounding up all the able men in order to send them to the factories so they could send the Germans to fight their war. So that her brother lived in Amsterdam, and they were having razzias, which is the name for getting men and getting bikes, you know. And so she had her brother come, and he brought a little tiny Jewish lady. Now, if you...
I'm sorry, you brought what?
Jewish lady, a Jewish lady. Now, if you harbored a Jew, they would burn your house. They would kill you. They would do anything. And I mean, they did that regularly. They harassed them in the most horrible way. Well, we all know that. And so that lady says, I don't want her. I'm not going to take care of her. But my mother-in-law says, I'll take her. And she had 3 rooms. And twice the Germans came to her house. And one time, my husband was saying, he said, yeah, I was laying in bed and my mother threw water in my face and said, you're sick. So that was the routine. And then the next time they went halfway up the stairs, and at that time they had, I can't think of the name. They had a very bad illness that was very contagious, and I can't think of it right now, the word. I got a hole in my pocket. And she screamed, oh, this is so-and-so, whatever the illness was. And they left halfway. They were halfway up the stairs, because my sister-in-law is still alive, and she was telling me that. She says it was just awful. Now, one of the brothers of my mother-in-law, the 2 that were from the wrong side, one of them drove an ambulance, and he would bring food for the Jewish lady. So he had, you know, supposedly he was from the wrong side, but he was helping her. But it must have been just horrendous to have somebody in there that you know is going to be killed. And after the war, I remember that the lady that was hidden, it became her best friend, and but also was very unusual. My father-in-law came home from Poland, and he still had the idea that Holland was the land of milk and honey. So in one swoop he ate the whole ration for a week. And then he had to deal with the little Jewish lady that was now taking his place. So that was kind of an awakening. Yeah, that is about it, I think. Do I have any other? Oh yeah, I have one more story. I was going to tell you that. When we looked out of the window, my father-in-law had a real good friend. They both were very close, and they were both Navy pilots. Well, his friend was shot down, and I saw that, and for some reason, just about a month ago, the family of that friend is trying to get all the information. And so I told him, I said, well, this is where I lived, this is where I could see the fight, and I saw him shot down. So then they tell me the most unbelievable story. I've never heard of this. Somebody this year went to Italy, and they went to a thrift store, and they found the pictures of the pilot that shot him down. Can you believe that? To go to Italy and then go, well, they must have been looking for things, but why would you go to a thrift store? But I thought that was just unbelievable, because the Italian pilot, it were both Nazis and Italians, you know, they were fascists. So he was so proud that he shot somebody down, so he took a picture. And then they found it in a thrift store. I think that is the end. I have here an ID card. I have the stories, what is it? The orders that were given to us. This is my house where I lived. Oh, I forgot this. You will see that here, all the, okay, they're rounding up all the men. All the men of this age must go to the streets, and they were, by order of the German army, all men between the ages of 17 and 40 must register for employment. For this purpose, all men of this age must go to the streets with the prescribed equipment immediately upon receipt of this order. All other residents, including women and children, must stay in the houses until the act is over. The men of the previous years who are still found in the house during a search will be punished, whereby their private property will be addressed. Evidence of exemption from civil or military authorities must be brought for inspection. Even those who are in possession of such proof are obliged to go out on the street. The daily allowance consists of good costs, smoking articles, and pay according to applicable rate. Remaining families will be taken care of. It is forbidden for all residents of the municipality to leave their places of residence. Those who attempt to flee or resist will be shot. And they did. And so my neighbor had 5 boys. 4 of them were of the age. And we said, hey, and you will see that here. We lived on the corner, but their house was in the Cantaloupe Street. And you will see that later on. So the Germans thought that that was our house, because our front door was in the, not the Blueberry, the other street. Boysenberry Street. And you will see that. That's why I put it here. This is our front door, and these are their windows. So we said, hey, jump over, come here. And we have a hiding place under the floor. So we put them all under the floor. And they were very, very nervous. Well, of course, if you get an order like that. So my father said, stay here, stay here, stay here. They said, no, we are going to jump back, because the next thing they will find your front door and they will come in your house. And so they jumped back, and unfortunately there was one German soldier that was apparently loving the garden, because he left in the garden, so they all jumped right back. But they escaped. They escaped from the truck or whatever, and they came back again, and then we could find places for it. Also, my uncle, who at that time was maybe 40 or so, 45, and that was also a funny story. He was in the YMCA building, and somehow the Germans thought that that was a good place to gather or make coffee or whatever. And he ended up sitting under the sink. You know how much room that is. And he sat there for 4 hours. He came back and he said, "Oh, I'm kind of cool, but I'm not going there." So, I mean, that are just stories that I remember that people were telling me. But here is my exhibit of some of the stories. Like we had a horrible Holocaust camp, and that was, we called it the curse, was Westerbork. And that's where the Dutch Jews were first thing. And the daughter of the lady that my mother-in-law hid was rounded up in Amsterdam, and she was killed right away. So she didn't make it very far. So, but it was just, you know, my daughter is always, she says, "Well, you sound like it is fun." Well, but if you are allowed to lie and to do things to people, to make it difficult, and there are no rules, you know, you can, and then we would sit in line, in hunger lines for ages, but there would be a fish load or something going in, and we had fun. We just took our little stools and we sat there and we talked to everybody, and then we came home and we told all the stories of the world, you know, when you were 8.
Yeah, you were 7 when they came?
I was 7, but I was 9 when the...
That's why I wondered how long.
Yeah, because it was 5 years. 5 years, and we were liberated in 1945.
So 5 years you were...
Well, 3 years of those, 2 years of those were hunger. Before that, there were all rules. There were, you know, curfews. You couldn't go out of the house after 7 o'clock or so, or 8 o'clock. Or
What about your schooling? Did you, I mean...
Oh, that was totally a disaster, and that's why I'm not all that smart. I have an excuse. But yeah, all the teachers were gone.
Sure.
I think you got an education.
So they would give us tasks, and then you had to take the streetcars were still running, and we still had water. I never remember not having water. So the streetcars were running, and we would go and get our assignments, and then you had to go and bring them back again, but I never saw them corrected. I always brought them back and forth, but I don't remember any instruction or anything going on.
Yeah.
So the schooling, no.
No.
That was not good.
How did you meet your husband?
Oh, that's an entirely different story. That was not in the war. And I hate to tell this, but I invaded his family because his family, of course, was military. His father was very high up. He had all the stripes, you know. He was a commander, and we tried to save our colonies. He was in charge of the Dutch army to try to prevent Indonesia from getting their independence. So he was really high up, and my father was a socialist. And on the 100th birthday of my mother-in-law, there were still some old guys that were still alive too, And they just wondered, how did you sneak in? And I said, well, you know, we have our ways. You might not suspect us, but we also have charm and we can work our ways in. And apparently I did.
Yeah, when the kids were left Hague, this was to protect the kids from things that were going on. Was it a decision by parents to send kids to safety across the Zuiderzee?
Well, there was hunger, there was nothing to eat.
Hmm?
There was nothing to eat,
Right.
absolutely
Okay.
nothing.
So for,
So it,
so they
and
wouldn't
they
starve.
did it in England too.
Right.
Yeah.
In England they sent a lot of kids away.
Right.
And you had the chance that you would never see them again. Because like I said, The Hague was bombed.
So that was like 43 or so that the kids left the Hague.
I think it was 44 when the bridge too far. I think that was because they first had the Battle of the Bulge, and then they came over, and then apparently they slipped because all the Germans went up. No, not the Germans. All the Americans went up to Germany, and the Canadians took Holland. And the Canadians, by the way, also harbored our soon-to-be queen. Queen Juliana at that time was young, and she lived in Canada, but my father-in-law was assigned to take Queen Wilhelmina to England, but he was shot down. So they had to bring her over with a boat, because there were no planes. And I found that out all later on. You know, we have so many stories that you know about now and then forget. I just found all this stuff just an hour ago. Oh boy, I have to do something. But anyhow, if you want to see how this all, well, this was the horrible Westerbork story. This was a real interesting story. My daughter, on my 80th birthday, presented me with this little bracelet. Now, I got a bracelet like that from my grandmother, and what they did is they cut out dimes with the head of the queen. And I very stealthily would hide it under my sleeves, you know, because they couldn't see that that was for the queen. So at one day I was standing in front of a window, and my friend was with me. Well, she was my friend then. I told her, I said, you know, I got a secret. And I showed her that. And I wasn't supposed to do that. Well, the next morning she came in full regalia of the Hitlerjugend, the Dutch Hitlerjugend. I didn't dare to tell my parents because now they're gonna get my father, you know. They never did. But I mean, that was and she found this on eBay. Oh. And she brought that to me for my birthday present. Can you believe that? No. On eBay she found it, and then gave it to me, and I said, "What's that?" So sometimes it's good to be on eBay. Yeah, that is a crazy story. Okay, I think I got it all.
Well, just in passing here, I want to say that I've been talking to her about 2 or 3 years trying to get her to tell the story, and no, nobody's going to want to hear this. So we can see that I was right and she was wrong.